Hi, this is Kerry Artak with Wicked Stocks, bringing you your weekly Mag 7 report for the week of Monday, June 1st, 2026. We start with Microsoft as usual, and I can backtrack a little bit. That's usually helpful. It was back in March, middle of March, that we settled below this significant 4 or 5 year channel bottom that is now at 409.10. We spent a little over a month below it. Our initial target was the upper 340s to mid 340s, this high-low area going back to 21 and 25, but ultimately anticipating the very real possibility of longer-term bearish continuation to this full channel extension and perhaps this low area in the low 200s. That obviously didn't happen, and in fact, it was the week of April 13th that we rallied back to close back above this structure. The shrugging off of a significant sell signal, as that was, is in itself a sign of strength. So in other words, I often say a failed sell signal is in itself a valid buy signal. Much of the time, it depends on the circumstances, but when it comes to these long-term structures, it usually is the case. In other words, Microsoft told us, essentially, had very little interest in bearish continuation, rejecting the long-term sell signal. That was a classic sell signal, and in the process has indicated what is really the 480s, 487.18. Now, we did get locked into consolidation phase for a couple of months, but this channel bottom, 409.10, continued to hold after we closed back above it. I can take us through a couple of events that have occurred over the last few weeks. One was the settlement barely 2 weeks ago above this descending channel top that is now at 410.17. This area, 409.10, 410.17, solid zone to buy into if given the opportunity. I just don't think you're going to see that now, given the fact that we closed last week above this consolidation. We closed last week above the high of the low over the last couple of months. And that's at 429.92. So I do think you can buy the 429 handle, 429.92 in particular, 430. This high here is 433.70. You know, that low 430s, upper 420s is a platform of support you can buy into through the month of June. I do think by the end of July or sooner, we should now see this 487.18 level, which I consider to be a 2 to 3 month objective, as you recall, when we settled back above the 409.10 structure a couple of months ago. So we're 2 months into a 2 to 3 month buy signal. This will probably take the better part of 2 more months, but it may not. With the present volatility, this could be over the next 3 to 5 weeks. In other words, by the end of June, 487.18 is an area where you can take profits on a long position and perhaps play the short side. As we move into July, August, we could top out here for a month or so. Let's move on to Meta. Meta did the same thing, actually. It closed below not so significant a channel support as we just saw in Microsoft, but it was a 1 year channel bottom back in late March. We spent about 2 weeks below it and then rallied back above it. And it's been holding well ever since. 603.25 is still your base of support. Once again, the failure to follow through on a classic sell signal, as this was, in which we were anticipating 486.11, is in itself a sign of strength. And so at least stability in this case, holding above 603.25, near term, near to midterm. This is a market that can be bought. I don't see breakaway to the upside, though, unless we were to close in the coming weeks above 683.01. So this is our pivot point into later year. We could trade inside this wedge between 603.25, which is once again this channel bottom climbing weekly. We'll be providing you this information on a week-by-week basis. This is your area to buy into if your time horizon is, say, through June. We are anticipating probably by the end of June or sooner, 683.01, where we could top out into July and fall away again into this low 600 area, that long-term channel bottom. Now, if we were to close above 683.01 in the coming weeks, that is your action really to buy Meta, not only near midterm, but also long-term. That, which is to say, within about 2 to 3 months, I would expect a retest of the 796.25 all-time high that was put out back in August of last year. But I do think potentially by the end of the year, I'm going to call this a 6-month rally, perhaps. Now there is, of course, double top potential at 796 and a quarter that could play out for more than a week, even a month, and we could ease back. But I do think closing above this classic descending channel top at the top of an all-time high does in itself signal longer-term bullish continuation, bull trend resumption. 906.94 would not surprise me by the end of the year, and that is as we continue into September in the 940s. So that is really it in terms of the upside. Let's cover the downside a little bit. Closing below 603 and a quarter today, not expected. I'm saying not today, for the week itself. Closing below 603 and a quarter, and we've got 486.11 as once again a 2 to 3 month target. And I do see this longer term channel bottom, kind of the sister formation to 603 and a quarter, as capable of containing annual selling pressures. I just don't see us testing this. It does become a reality, though, if we close below 603 and a quarter within about 2 to 3 months. So no compelling reason to stay long Meta if your time horizon is 2 to 3 months out or less, if we were to close this week below 603 and a quarter. And inversely, no compelling reason to be short Meta over the same time horizon if in the coming weeks we close above 683.01. On to Alphabet. Alphabet is definitely contradicting much of what we're seeing in other high-profile stocks. I can walk us through a buy signal that occurred a month ago when we closed above this rising channel top. That set up 425.89 as a 2 to 3 week target. Didn't happen, obviously. That is a full swing, by the way, taking this February high, subtracting from it the March low, and then just sort of flipping that on its head 100%. An exhaustion point where the market reaches a state of equilibrium and balance, but we never even reached that. And so having 2 weeks ago not only close back below this rising channel top, but also forming a bit of a reversal where we put out a new all-time high and we closed negative on the week. And then last week we closed below the low of the high. So I'm putting this Alphabet, Google, into the bearish column as we continue not only through June, but I think even into July roughly. Let me jump to this chart here. I do think this 300.83 is attainable. It's a bit of a stretch, I know, kind of swinging for the fences in terms of the downside target here, but this is actually climbing at a decent pace, and by the end of August, we're already converging with this 349 high. So I will say 349 is likely over the next 3 to 5 weeks, provided we continue closing week by week below 381.77. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if over the next couple, 2-3 months, we test this 300.83 channel bottom that can absorb selling not only through the third quarter, but even through the rest of the year. We can round up from there. So heavy below 381.77. I'm going to go back to this chart, though, and say that if we close above 381.77, we're kind of in this neutral congestive framework. I don't see that as a bullish sign, but I do see it as a neutral sign. So if you got short last week below 381.77 and we close back above it this week, I would suggest lightening up on that short position, because I don't think you're going to see any immediate gratification. In fact, it may be just to the opposite, but I also don't see a buy signal. Now, you've got two buy signals to choose from. I think it's closing at a new high settlement price on the weekly chart. So, for instance, if we were to close this week above 400.80, then it does shift everything back to the upside. You may, though, await also a settlement above the 403.15 channel top. That would help in indicating 425.89 within 1 to 3 weeks. And I see this as kind of a hesitation point. That where we could consolidate once again. I think if we close above 403.15, combined with kind of the rejection of the sell signal from last week below 381.77, that reverses everything. And I do think if you're a longer-term position holder or want to be in Alphabet, that is your action to take, is to play the long side of the market, to invest in Alphabet as we move through the rest of the year with a settlement this week above 400.80. This 509.42 full channel extension would be in reach, possibly by the end of the third quarter. There's plenty of precedent for that kind of movement. I'm going to move on to Amazon. Amazon put off a nice buy signal, if you recall, back in April when it closed above this descending channel top that is presently well below the market at 220.91. In the process, we rallied to a new all-time high, tagged this inside channel that goes back to April of 25. That's at 281.26. I'm calling this a band or a range of resistance up to the more meaningful 289.86. which is in itself a 3-year rising channel top. This is a zone that can continue to contain buying pressures through the third quarter, and from here we can fall away again back into this area, in particular 258.60 within 2 to 3 months of doing so, and possibly even longer term we can find ourselves in a longer term sweeping bearish rotation to what would then be channel support. It's a little early to even talk about this, but into the low 200s perhaps, and climbing. As we get into the later part of the year, it's in the 220s. So as we test these channel tops, we can fall to the channel bottoms within, 6 months or so, 6 to 12 months at the most. We see plenty of precedent for more rapid descent, but this was an exception. This was the early Trump administration tariff talk, if you recall, the big sell-off from February to April. I don't see that happening again, but you never know. It could happen for some other reason. So yes, you can sell the 280s in Amazon, or if you're long, I would lighten up on a position here, whether it's near term, midterm, or even long term, because this is an area where we could top out into later year and find ourselves in the 220s as we move into the fourth quarter, later part of this year. If we were to close above 289.6, we would have a significant long-term show of strength. I'm just not prepared yet to show you exactly what that is because I haven't done all the homework, but I will get to this. As we push into this zone, I will provide you probably in next week's video. Now, downside, closing back below this high of 258.60 does put the market back on its heels, and I do think then highly susceptible to a bearish continuation into, once again, the 220s. This descending channel top converges with this channel bottom here in the 205s. It'll converge in the middle of July around 211, 212. So this would be the area that I would suggest is in reach within 2 to 3 months of closing back below 258.60. Until then, you could say the month of June into July is a two-sided framework between 258.60 floor of support and the 280 ceiling of resistance for Amazon. I have another chart here. Yeah, this is just sort of depicts what I would expect if we close back below 258.60. This converging zone of support that is around 201.50 by the end of August. I think that would be in play if we were to close the week back below 258.60. On to Apple. Apple we cover every single week for our paid subscribers. I don't want to get too much into this. We do a 5 to 10 minute video every week. This is just broad brushstroke. Apple has been strong for the last few weeks. Longer term buy signal that did occur with the settlement above 293.20. Our near term objective is 326.87 and climbing. This in itself is a 1.5 year rising channel top that can contain monthly, possibly quarterly highs. We can top out in the 320s, fall back into the 290s within 2 to 3 months. If we close above 326.87 this week, not going to happen, but it is possible we could close above this structure as we move into July, perhaps. It will then be in the 340s. That should set off continued accelerated upside, where by the end of the year, we could find ourselves in the 390s, no kidding. If we close above 326.87 or this formation in the coming weeks, I would expect a continued vertical move into later year. This full channel extension at 392.47 is considered a long-term objective anyway, a 1 to 2 year objective. This was about a year here, as I recall, a little less. This was 9 months, and so that is quite possible. Now, downside, needless to say, closing back below 293.20 is a kibosh on longer-term bullish momentum, and I would expect that probably the 240s, 250s within 2 to 3 months. I show in particular structures that you can anticipate within 2 to 3 months if we were closed below 293.20 in the subscription platform of wickedstocks.com. Good high for the year if we close back below 293.20. Tesla, we provide every single day for free on our Wicked Stocks YouTube channel. You may have already watched it for Monday. We have this convergence right now between 354.65 and 448.95. Of the two, 354.65 is the more important. It is a one-year structure, actually a little bit longer than that now, that we tested a few months ago. And having tested it, I'd mentioned how this 542.91 6-year channel top remains in play by the end of the year, becomes fully expected within 2 to 3 months if we close this week above 448.95. Until then, this is a wedge we can fill out for the next 1 to 2 months, selling the upper 440s, buying the mid 350s, both of which are converging upon each other as we continue through the third quarter. Closing this week above 448.95 is a go-long strategy for Tesla. Within 3 to 5 weeks, 498.83 likely. That is the all-time high put out last December. And within 2 to 3 months, 542.91 where we could top out for the rest of the year. Let's move on to NVIDIA. NVIDIA we cover every single day at wickedstocks.com subscription. By the way, for a limited time, we are offering half off your first month subscription. We give you a 2-week trial anyway, so it's Wicked50. You just type in the coupon code WICKED50, the number 50, the word wicked followed by the number 50, no hyphens, no spaces, and that will give you half off your first month. You'll be able to see the NVIDIA report every single day. This is broad brushstroke here. We show this chart and about 8 others in our daily NVIDIA video. But last week, takeaway, we closed below the low of the high. Among other elements preceded that. This now has indicated what is likely to occur is a low 190s objective. This could be within a week, given recent volatility. This could be within 2 to 3 weeks, but I think somewhere in the zone of 1 to 3 weeks, we should find ourselves in the low 190s where bottom picking opportunity presents itself through the third quarter, Willie. We can round up from here into the 240s, 250s by the end of the year or sooner, following a test of 193.51. If we do close above 213.80, that neutralizes the sell signal and allows the 240s then over the next 3 to 5 weeks. In our daily NVIDIA report, we give you exact numbers on the daily chart that, if settled above, would clarify 243.36 as a 2 to 3 week target. Let's move on to, I want to mention, just show the S&P 500 index. Once again, we also cover this at wickedstocks.com on a week-by-week basis, but this is the opening view of the video that we have for last week. This week, rather, we closed above some wave counts in the S&P 500, expecting bullish continuation into later Q3 now. I'm not showing the target. That's just giving away too much for people who pay for the subscription. But nonetheless, the takeaway here is the S&P 500 index is showing a decidedly bullish framework as we move now through the third quarter. We are anticipating the possibility of a near to midterm high in the 74.59 to 74.91 region, allowing possible bearish rotation back into the 6,800 handle within several months. But that is not to be. All systems go to the upside for the S&P unless we close this week back below 74.59 in the S&P 500 index, the underlying cash index. That would look bearish to me as we move into July, August. And finally, Palantir, not part of the Mad 7, but we definitely provide it every week. We have been. We're very close to a significant buy signal in Palantir, a very classic convergence of 2 different channel structures. You've got one that goes back to February, so this is like a 3-4 month, mostly horizontal, and then you have the longer term that goes really back to the November 25 high, not quite a year, maybe more like 8-9 months in the making, at 158 even. This is your ceiling of resistance. So if you're a near-term swing trader in Palantir, this is the area to short sell back into the mid 120s within 3 to 5 weeks or less, and we can continue to bottom out here at 125.41 as we move through the month of June. If we close below 125.41, then that is a sell signal that would likely yield, believe it or not, the low to mid 60s within probably 2 to 3 months. Upside, closing above 158 this week in Palantir, does indeed indicate. Now, Palantir has this history of volatility spike. And so I think if we close above 158 by the end of July, 207.52 would not surprise me in the least. And I do think as we continue into later year, by the end of the year, you could see there's precedent here, April of 25 to November of 25. What is that? About 6 months? I'm just guessing. Oh, sorry about that, folks. I just lost a chart. I'm going to go back to it right now. Yes, closing above 158 even. By the end of the year, I think 240, 250 in reach. The point I was trying to make here was April low, November high. That is, I'm just going to guess. I'm not going to do it right now, but about 6 months of activity. That could happen again over the following 6 months. So by the end of the year, yes, settlement above 158 even, and it is, do not be short Palantir. You want to be long a 207.52 likely within a couple of months, and within about 6 months by the end of the year, I think 240, 250 in reach. That is all I've got. Almost hitting 20 minutes this week. I'm going to leave it at that for this week's Mag 7 video analysis. You have a great week.